Nikita Khrushchev was in the middle of a passionate speech in which he was denouncing the crimes of Stalin, when all of a sudden someone from the audience started heckling him. "You are a colleague of Stalin. Why didn't you stop him?" Khrushchev apparently couldn't see who the heckler was, and he barked out, "Who said that?"
Who said that? Who the fuck said that?
Not a single hand went up. No one moved a muscle. After a few seconds of tense silence, Khrushchev finally said in a quiet voice, "Now you know why I didn't stop him." Instead of just arguing that anyone facing Stalin was afraid, knowing that the slightest sign of rebellion would mean certain death, he had made them feel what it was like to face Stalin. He had made them feel the paranoia, the fear of speaking up, the terror of confronting the leader, which in this particular case, it wasn't even Stalin. It was Khrushchev. The demonstration was visceral, and no more argument was necessary. Now, is this a true story? Probably not, as no one is able to find a source for it. But the reason that I'm telling you this is that it shows a very important aspect of human nature. In recent years, I have seen a lot of people, especially on Reddit and on the Twitter, show the picture of the guy refusing to do the Nazi salute. And there's also a less renowned picture where the English football team is doing the Nazi salute, but a football player refuses to do so, and he actually got in a lot of trouble for not saluting. And all of the people showing that picture, they're like, "Oh, if I was there, I would have been that guy. If I was in the story The Emperor's New Clothes, I would have been the child pointing it out." It's very simple for us to tell right for wrong. All that it requires for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. And while that is entirely correct, the reality is a lot more complex. It's not that people do not know right from wrong, but the reality is that people are afraid of the consequences. And in today's society, one of the more common bad consequences that can happen whenever someone speaks out about a controversial issue is that they can get fired from their job. Which, don't get me wrong, is pretty bad. Being unable to pay your bills, being unable to buy food. And this is more than enough to convince a lot of people to support policies or political positions that they entirely disagree with, but they don't want anyone else to believe or to think that they're on the wrong side of history. Meanwhile, in the past, the people that were criticizing for not speaking out, they would have faced persecution much worse than we can face today. For example, they could have been locked up in prison, could have been super canceled, and that is why they didn't speak out. That is why you notice that in the past, governments did abhorrent things that when we look back, it's like, how can people have gone along with this? How could people have been so stupid? And the answer is because the consequences of not going along with it would have been quite dramatic. And this has been going on for as long as history can remember. Now, I talked about this story in a previous video, but I think it's very important that we talk about it again because it's a very powerful story and I wish people could tell it to someone else. The Emperor's New Clothes is a very interesting one, but this is a lot more powerful because it's rooted in reality. It's about a man by the name of Zhao Gao in ancient China who was the teacher of the emperor. And he wanted to start a coup, he wanted to gain power for himself, but he didn't know which nobles are on his side and which nobles are against him. So in order to figure it out, one day he appears in front of the emperor riding a deer. And the emperor was very confused, so he asked Zhao, why is he riding a deer? To which Zhao responds, "No, you're mistaken, your highness, I'm riding a horse." So the emperor is absolutely baffled and starts asking other nobles for their opinion. Now, some nobles chose to remain silent. Other nobles chose to say that it's a deer and agreed with the emperor. And there were nobles who said, no, it's absolutely a horse. Now, after the coup, when Zhao does manage to get power, he executes every single noble that said it's either a deer or remain silent. So in other words, the people who actually call the truth or the people who are afraid to take a side were executed. And this is a story from ancient China. So it's as old as time itself. In other words, the dictator not only wants people to be on his side proactively and constantly demonstrate that they are on his side, but they also want to show that they are willing to ignore reality, that they are willing to ignore what is in front of them and just say something that they know it's false, but they not only need to accept the lie, but they need to perpetuate the lie. And this is why dictatorships are so brutal. This is why people are afraid of speaking out. And in many dictatorships, it wasn't just the person speaking out that got into trouble. It was their family members, their loved ones. And it's very difficult as an Eastern European who lived through something like this to explain it to a Westerner who never had to face something like this. And, hopefully, people will understand a little bit more into human nature and why these things are happening. And I have seen in the last couple of years a lot of excesses that Western governments took, which made Western governments look a little bit more like China light than the free liberal democracies that I grew up with. And the interesting part is that most people went along with it. There were people that did speak out, and there were people that tried to push back against the authoritarianism, but the overwhelming amount of them weren't the guy that didn't salute. Instead, they sat at home, they watched the television, and they did exactly word for word what the television told them. And speaking with a lot of people in private, especially knowing that a lot of people thought differently than they acted in public, what they told me is that they weren't concerned of whether or not what's on television is true, but they were far more concerned with how other people would act towards them based on what they thought. So they wanted to know what are the correct opinions to have in public in order to avoid any type of peer pressure. And the peer pressure came from other people who were doing the pressure in order to show that they're not like the guy they're pressuring. So it's a very interesting feedback loop that is happening whenever you have something that people disagree with, but it's being pushed by an authority, is that most people try to show that they're on the side of the authority so that they don't get punished. And in doing so, they punish their friends, they punish their coworkers, they punish their family members, just so that they are being viewed as the good guys and that they are on the correct side of history, which is a very annoying phrase that you constantly find on Twitter and on Reddit, like the right side of history. Anyway, right. Was a little bit of a thinking piece that I made in this video, a little bit of philosophy. Let me know what you guys think about it, and I'll see you later. Take care.